Welcome to our next Q&A session on my Substack. This one's going to be overcoming micromanagement. We got a few minutes here before 8 o'clock rolls around. Thought I'd try something different this time and try to come on air a little early just to give people a time to come in and participate and sign in and check off so we could recognize a few people before we got started. Not sure that's going to happen. This is all just really still very new and in the infancy stages. And so I'm not too sure how it's going to play out. I hope it catches on because we're presenting a lot of really good information that I think can help leaders be more effective with their people, and consequently we will get a better connection and people will start at least this is what I've seen. You get a better connection when you know how to interpersonally interact with other people effectively. Not most of us haven't really been trained to do that. I was talking to some people just this week that they kind of agree with me. We really need to start this and make it part of mandatory curriculum in high school, at least start in high school, and have 4 years of actual opportunity for people to develop and be taught how to communicate effectively and use communication effectively. It's something that it connects with everything. Nothing we do when somebody else is involved doesn't have interpersonal communication at its base. So it's really a very important kind of thing. So I'm trying to get a feel for how to convince people to do that. More than consulting and coaching and all of that kind of stuff, I'd almost like to get into the realm of two realms that I'd like to pursue that probably have never been part of my professional career, even though teaching to some extent is part of everyday environment when you're a leader. But I would really like to spearhead this idea of putting interpersonal communication as we're teaching it here and where it's practical and useful in your daily life, to teach that to high school students. Um, you could actually begin, I think, cognitively a little earlier than high school, but certainly I think high school's a good realm. That's a good 4 years of helping someone understand how to communicate it and talking about things like when you want to say something to somebody, there's a lot more involved in that discussion than just thinking about what you want to say. Now there's things that we do that are habitual for us, like good morning. You don't have to think about that very much, okay? I'm talking about those things that cause difficulties. So the things, for example, that cause the situations that we're discussing in this series of 10 leadership pain points. You know, the idea of if you're not clear and concise in your communication, then it makes it difficult for people to understand things and misinformation. Or the second thing we talked about, I think, was transparency. You know, when you want to share information, you can't share information, but it's important to talk to people about why you can't share it. Those kinds of things. So got about another minute here anyway, that's one of the things that I would like to really do. The other thing is, not from the standpoint of a consulting or a coaching perspective, but I'd almost like to take a sort of a tutor role with HR managers and people who are who are working with leaders to try and solve problems within the organization, to get people to work better, more cohesively, to build a stronger, more collaborative, community-based, collegial organization, a healthy, psychologically safe culture to operate in. Human resource people, that's the role that they play in many cases. And and they have to balance that, of course, with trying to achieve the company objectives. And sometimes that can get tedious. And all of those kinds of things, the ability to help connect people and solve problems between employees, conflicts, to help people impact each other more effectively, to connect the top of the organization with the bottom so that there's free flowing, transparent, clear, consistent information flowing and feedback flowing back from that information that's the same way. So, anyway, welcome to this session. I thought we'd go ahead and just get started by jumping right into a brief review, and then we'll see if we have any questions that you might have. Of course, I want to say to you, please subscribe to my Substack and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Building Renaissance Leaders, by subscribing and hitting the like. And when you get there's a notification little bell there you can set up notifications with. That tells me you're going to get the emails and the information sent to you to let you know when I'm doing something like this video. And that's important to me because then you'll be there. People will begin to start seeing that there's some value to it as more people begin to share it. And we can then begin to get a more expansive group of people participating in. We only have people asking questions or participating or coming on the air with me to share things, and that always makes the whole thing a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable to work with. From an online perspective, I truly like to work with a team of about 6 people who are working on a project. Like I have a 17-week course that I can teach that way. If 6 people want to take it, or somebody in a company wants to have, say, all of their leaders and their department take this course. It's a course on how to effectively use interpersonal communication to enhance your leadership and to increase that leadership role to a heightened, different paradigm than we have been doing over the last 4 decades. So it's an interesting course. Like I said, 17 weeks long. It's about 1 week a night for 2 hours a night. And we cover a topic kind of like we're doing right here, except it's more educational as opposed to just a question and answer session. So let's go ahead and get into the session on overcoming micromanagement. There's probably, I don't think there's anyone who's worked somewhere that hasn't run into a micromanager somewhere. They are often well-intentioned, but sometimes so irritable and so frustrating. And you just, depending on the culture, you don't know how to get this micromanager to see that they need to take a different approach with you. But so this is what we're going to talk about. What is micromanagement? What is it? How does this impact you? What are some things we can do to ensure we're not seen as micromanagers? That doesn't mean that you don't work with your people and that you don't spend time with them. So it's not a matter of just time. It's the kind of time you're spending with people and that environment. So I thought we'd just take a look at a few of the things that we can see are important to us. Uh, First of all, micromanagement's more than just the boss that cares. I've highlighted this statement because I think this is important for you to grasp about micromanagement. From an interpersonal communication perspective, it's a lack of trust and breakdown in effective dialogue. That's how it's viewed by employees a lot of the time. They feel, there's a lot of measurements we take where we measure and ask questions. I know Gallup does this a lot with people when they do their engagement surveys, and that is, how valued do you feel as an employee? Well, this is one of those areas that pops up periodically in terms of why people don't feel valued. It's because they don't feel trusted. You don't feel like they know what they're talking about. So it's a micromanager leader often communicates through the lens of fear and control rather than empowerment and collaboration. I find this where people have put leaders in position who were excellent at their job. So if you were an excellent salesman, then for some reason leadership wants to take you and mold you into a leader so that you can run the department, and hopefully that department, all of the people in that department, all the salespeople in that department will mushroom into the salesperson you were and expand the capacity of that department. And often it doesn't work out. And it doesn't work out because there's a difference between being a good salesperson, really good at your job and loving selling and being really great at it, and even helping other people sometimes sell or improve their sales. But then when you're responsible for leading those people and setting the objectives and handling all of the issues that come up when something's not on track, and then these people tend to say, okay, this isn't working. I'll just do it myself, or I'll tell them how to do it exactly. And so they get in there and they say, this is exactly what I want you to do. And don't veer from this one bit. Well, think about that. If you're sitting there and you're being told that, what happens? What happens to your ego and who you are and what you're about? And it sends a signal that I don't think you know what you're doing, or you don't know it well enough to let you do it on your own without me overseeing you constantly. Well, if you have 30 people and you're trying to do that with everybody, it can wreck them and it can also wreck you. And we'll see about that here in a second. So let's interpersonal communication in a micromanaged environment often looks like a one-way street. Like I said, the person is telling you what to do, and they're not asking you how you think about it, or they're not allowing you to even ask questions to clarify that. The feedback process is often caught up. We talked about feedback last week and how important it is. Well, and we said when there's an absence of it, and this is one of those environments where the absence of feedback can happen because people are restricted in terms of asking questions or whatever, because the person is in a micromanagement mode. So the leader really dominates the conversation. He's giving hyper detailed instructions and leaving a little room for the subordinates' input. And this style of communication is kind of characterized by constant checking. So this isn't a situation where the leader is absent. They're there quite a bit. It's when they're there that it's more of a disruption, more of a difficulty for the employee. There's not a lot of good, again, connection between the leader and the employee. Consequently, there's not a lot of trust. There's not a lot of scenarios where the employees feel like they can input to something. Maybe if we tweaked it or changed a little, it might work better. None of that is happening in a micromanaged environment. So it's normally, frequently, again, unscheduled. And this is, by the way, time is a nonverbal communication signal. So how you think about or when you do something and it happens to be an inconvenience to the other person, that sends a nonverbal signal to the person. You're not really telling them, they're not really telling you you're irritating them, but you're very much irritating them. You're very much getting in their way. And that signal says that you really don't care about them much or you don't trust them much. There's a lot that could be interpreted from that, what we call chronemics, time. So this happens a lot of times in remote workers when we don't consider the time differences in the zones around the world where we're actually having teams come together or we're trying to do a one-on-one conference like or a one-on-many conference like we're doing here. They're over-instruction, providing excessively detailed guidance. This is where the person doesn't feel like you're as good as they are, and so they have to jump in and do it because they want the product to be as good as what they were doing, what they were selling, but you're not there yet. And so rather than helping you and instructing you and working, guiding you through learning and growing and allowing you to make the mistakes and everything they made, they feel like they have to do it themselves. Otherwise, they're not going to get to that standard that person's boss thinks that they're leading them. So, and then of course, correction of minutia, focusing on really trivial details, the small things that I don't know. You may have a better way to do it than that new leader or that leader has, and you don't have an opportunity. To actually change something and make it better than what the leader had. So those are some of the things that we see in a micromanager. So if you walked in and you were simply into a company you knew nothing about, and you were looking to see whether or not this company was plagued with micromanagement, you would look for these kinds of things. Is the boss there talking to them? Is what they're talking about small detail things and the employee seems frustrated with it? Or you can actually see the nonverbal reaction of the employee when you see this happening. I see this sometimes in fast food restaurants when I go in. Sometimes I'll go in and have coffee and just watch fast food people to see if that's still the trend in the fast food industry, and it is today. We haven't made much progress because we don't train those leaders as effectively as we need to, and we put them in there before they're ready, and you see them constantly on the front line over the employees. The employee will be struggling a little bit with a key while they're waiting, and the customer and that manager will push them out of the way and get the customer because the guideline is to get the customer service fast and with quality food. And so the manager will step in and just do it. And then they often forget to come back and talk with the employee about why they did that. So these are the things you notice. I don't care whether you're in a retail store, you're in a salon watching hairdressers, you're in a jewelry store, you're in a bank, whether you're in you're out on an oil field in a rig. All of these concepts are in play when you have somebody directing or guiding or leading someone else. So as noted in the provided literature, and this is some of the books the ebooks that you can find on my website that I recommend you read that reinforces some of this information. The Renaissance Leadership Odyssey book that I have emphasizes the importance of navigating complex interpersonal landscapes. This means we have a different world now. AI is going to bring upon us a whole host of issues that are going to bug us. And there are new things that we're not used to dealing with, and leaders have not been trained how to handle making that work within an organization. And it's already being sold as with fear to start with. So you can see how a leader who might be a micromanager could enhance that fear greatly in the workforce real quickly. So this is going to be a very difficult next couple of decades for leaders. And what I say in this book, The Leadership Odyssey, Renaissance Leadership Odyssey, is we have to change the paradigm. We have to think about what the role of a leader really is. And it can't be 40% or 60% trying to lead and help people become better, and 40% actually doing whatever that functional task is. You have to back a lot more out of that. That ratio is going to have to be reduced considerably, and that means you're going to have to put more trust into your employees. And how you do that, how you communicate that, this is where leaders run into problems. They're not trained to communicate effectively so that they can get that trust built in them. And so some of the steps we're going to show you here are going to help you work towards that situation. So the high cost of control, the implications for leaders and teams. There's some significant implications to the organization, to the team, to the employees, and to the leaders in that team. It basically, when micromanagement is the primary style, or when it slips in occasionally, it disrupts the whole organization. For subordinate, it leads to them feeling like what we call learned helplessness. In other words, if you do something and you're not quite doing it right, and the leader says, let me show you how to do that, or let me help you work through doing this, and you say, sure, okay, and then he says, now get up and I'll show you exactly how to do it, sits down and does it, okay, then you have a micromanager that's not helping you learn how to do it. A person who's a non-micromanager is going to provide you some concepts that will help you learn and become more effective. But when a micromanager does this on a consistent basis, you get learned helplessness in an organization. Excuse me. It's getting cold and I have allergies here in Oklahoma. Okay, for leaders, it creates a bottleneck. In other words, you can only do this so much, and then all of a sudden you're trying to be the salesman and the sales department leader, and that's like just a massive undertaking. You can't be committed to both as effectively. So this is where you have to learn to separate your leadership. And this is why we spend so much time teaching people to learn how to effectively interact with your people and build trust, so you can release those things that need to be done that you used to do as a salesman. You don't do them anymore. Other people are doing those, and your job isn't to do them for those people anymore. Your job is to help them learn to do it more effectively and maybe even better than you did. So it becomes clogged up and difficult, and the leader often begins to. We're called out sometimes when we find out there's a lot of performance going downhill at the same time morale is going downhill. And that's a pretty good indicator you might have a micromanager on your hands. The organization, the impact is a decline in obviously innovation, agility. Teams become reactive rather than proactive. They're afraid to jump out and try new things, make mistakes that might be innovative and creative and helpful to the organization. We often hear, this is from the organizational assessment, this is where we often hear, I'm not valued. They don't care about what I think. That is often comes from the micromanager community, that one-way communication. I can almost tell you that when an employee tells me on a survey they're not feeling valued, and I ask them what's the number one thing you'd like your leader to do better, it's inevitably communication nearly every time. And you can see why, because what's generating that feeling is that one-way communication that the leader does with you. Okay, and so those are the costs and the impact to both the employee, the leader, and the organization. Micromanagement is pretty devastating, particularly if it gets ingrained into the organization and people try to run that from what we call legitimate power base. I have the title of job, I can tell you what to do, and then they try to put a coercive element to that also, like, I have control over your performance appraisal. I can give you these hours or those hours, or I can increase your salary, or I can suspend you without salary. All of those coercive techniques begin to creep into the leadership model in addition to the micromanagement, and it just makes it even a more negative situation. Very difficult kinds of things to turn around, but they can be turned around. And that's the good news. So how do you break that cycle? So here's one of the keys. Instead of telling people what to do or showing them exactly what to do, define the outcomes, not the methods. Instead of dictating every step of a process, because you could do it, that's why you're probably been put in the position. You're good at it. So you can focus clearly on defining desired and end results, okay? So here's what I want you to do. Here's what it would look like if it was done correctly, okay? And then you use your interpersonal dialogue to ensure the subordinate understands the why and the what and all the details. This is why it's very important to know that communication model and the aspects of emotional intelligence we were talking about before. And then give them the space to actually decide how to do it and figure that out. Sometimes they'll do the things that you want them to do after they figured it out. But what happens is they think they've learned it. They think they are the ones who have identified this idea to do it this way. And maybe it's just the way you'd want them to do it. But that self-discovery is critical to them learning and building their self-esteem and feeling like they're adding value to the organization. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing is establishing mutually agreed upon check-ins. Last week we talked about the importance of feedback. So if your employees never see you, then you're not checking in with them. And you're not getting the feedback you need to make sure everything, and then all of a sudden you get this surprise out there. Everything's not going like you thought it was. So establish agreed upon check-ins. In other words, replace constant interruptions with scheduled feedback loops. Now think about this. If you sort of have scheduled time where you schedule to spend time talking about your job or whatever, if your boss comes out all of a sudden and you're sitting there amongst your peers and he says, look, I want to see you in my office in 30 minutes. and then you go in the office and he closes the door. Now, it might be to let you know that you're going to take on this new great project, and he thinks you're doing great, but that's not the initial feeling. When you get called all of a sudden in front of a group of people, you're not told why, and it's unexpected. I can tell you right now, 98% of the time, an employee's gut starts churning and they're going, oh my God, what the hell have I done now? What is he going to do me? Am I going to be fired? Am I going to be laid off? I mean, there's all kinds of wild negative things. So if you allow that to fester, that's the kind of approach you take to things, unplanned, interruptions. You end up having a workforce that's often thinking a lot of negative things all the time, even though they might be positive. So with scheduled check-ins, even if it's just a minute, and you're going, how's it going? And you go, great, I think it's going great. We're working on it. Then you're going, fine. Okay, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. Or if anything you need, let me know. Okay? That kind of, and you know he's going to do that probably the first thing Monday mornings. He goes around, a boss goes around, he checks in with the employees, every one of them. How's it going? What's happening? Oh, okay, let me spend a little time. I noticed this on your thing right here. And you going, okay, fine. So you tell them what you noticed, what you expect it to look like in the end. And you say, okay, I'd like you to work on that. If you need some help, you call me and I'll be glad to come over and help you. That's so much better than when they don't do it right and you come jumping down their throat and say, just get out of the chair, I'll do it real quick, and because we'll get it done. Because it needs to be done right. And it does need to be done right. So, but that's not the right or the best way to get it done right. So effective communication during these sessions should be supportive, coaching oriented, which is two-way communication, sort of asking a lot of questions so the employee thinks through the stuff and comes up with a solution themselves. We call it a Socratic technique or employee-centered questioning. Those are good techniques that you can apply, good communication techniques you can apply. It also provides you the feedback that lets you know where the employee is, where you really need to spend a little extra time or not. And you always ask, because if you ask, the employee is 9 times out of 10 going to say yes. I'd be glad to have you come over and help me show something. That's great. And that's because you're a likable, approachable person and you're coming from a centered, employee-centered approach to the communication process. Okay, so that's the second way you can do it. And the third is to practice active listening. Now, we talked about active listening more. We're going to be talking about it some more. But there's more to active listening. Remember, we're trying to synchronize. If you go back and listen to some of these other question answer preliminary things I give, we get into this idea of active listening. So I'm not going to go into that again here, but just know there's more to active listening than just hearing the person and or reciting a few words they said to let them know you heard those few words. Because that doesn't really tell me you're listening. What tells me when you're listening is when you're feeling what that person's feeling, and then you're able to use your skills that you have learned from your active listening and your emotional intelligence to regulate the behavior where it needs to go so that you can resolve the issues or handle things the way they need to be handled. So miscommunication is a communication failure that erodes the autonomy of individuals, that self-regulation, that sense of self-esteem, and the ability that I can do it. By shifting from a control, you can improve this by shifting from a control-based communication style to one rooted in trust and emotional intelligence. These principles, these concepts, the ability to integrate emotional intelligence with that whole communication process that I had a video and left for you to work on. You should learn that. You should know that. It should become part of your everyday questioning, so that if I ask you a question like, how does, if I say to you, the meaning of the message is always in the mind of the receiver, how does that impact how you're going to create a message for another person and deliver that message? And then how are you going to know whether they've received it and understood it the way you intended them? And that process gives you the cue to that. The other aspects: how do I learn and create a message? How do I deliver that message? How do I balance the ability to create the words that I say and reinforce those words with nonverbal communication that makes my message congruent, so it's very clear? And then feedback and the active listening and feedback is how I'm able to ascertain that, yes, you understand it exactly the way I want it to happen. And you're probably going to go do it that way. But I'm going to ask you a few things to make sure that I feel comfortable you're on the right track. And if I hear the right things back, I'm fine. I'm out of your hair. I'm not going to be bothering you. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to stir your thoughts about maybe looking at it a little differently than you were about to do it. Okay? So those are just some things about micromanagement that should make life a lot easier for you when you're out there trying to improve your communication. Make it, but if you can overcome, if you can not become a micromanager, if you can overcome it if you are a micromanager, but if you can use the proper interpersonal and emotional intelligence, where in my book, Navigating Conversations, I say this is where emotional intelligence intersects with communication process mastery. When you can put those two things together and see how to apply them consistently, then you'll be more effective at interacting with your people, and they're going to respond accordingly. And when they do, that's going to create a great relationship with you and your employees. So that's pretty much where we are on this. I think now, if everybody is out there, we could go in here and to our little chat area. And if you have some communication questions or some questions about how to cope with if you have a story about a micromanager, I'd appreciate it. Now, so again, we don't have anybody who's subscribing. Now, this process is not open to the public. I'm not sharing a lot of this information with the public. This is pretty comprehensive, high level of interpersonal communication development. And so I'm not sharing it with the public. I'm only sharing it with paid subscribers. Now, if you subscribe, you'll get one chance to look at, well, when you subscribe, you'll be able to look at a couple of the most recent newsletters, which has a lot of what I just covered in it. And you'll be able to see the most recent one and maybe the one before that, I think. And you have one opportunity to attend one of these sessions and ask questions where you can interrelate with me right here on the screen right now, and we could answer a question, or you could put up a situation that you just had, and you might ask, how could you use interpersonal communication to be more effective? Or better than now, I won't want to micromanage you in that, so I would probably say, Well, let's talk about what are your thoughts about how this needs to be handled, or if it is a boss that is micromanaging you. You have to relate to that boss and sort of let them know that you're micromanaging me and it's making me feel not valued, and I'm uncomfortable with all of this. So you're going to have to create a message to send to your boss, knowing who your boss is and his leadership style, his culture, his sense of self-worth, all those kinds of things. You're going to have to create a message that says, I need to spend some time with you, kind of talking about how we interact, because I'm getting a little frustrated. I feel like you're micromanaging me. You could do it that way, or you could lay out this series of things, how he's interacting with you and how that makes you feel, and let him derive the idea that maybe he's been micromanaging you. So how about that? But I can't do much unless you get on here and let me know what the situations are, or we have some questions about it and where we can dialogue about it. Now, again, this time we didn't have anybody put anything in the emails. So last week we had a couple of people ask some questions of me. If you write out a question and email it to me, and my email address goes out with all my Substack information, and I put it out in YouTube and LinkedIn and Instagram and every place else where I'm located. It's a very simple email address, V for Victor, V Vogel at VictorLVogel.com. And so if you go to VictorLVogel.com, www.victorvogel.com, you can find those books and you can buy them there. But you can also, there's a place there where you can ask to spend some time with me. You can actually go to the events calendar and book out, an hour where we can sit down and talk. Maybe it'll make you feel better about subscribing and coming in. And I want to have that conversation with you so you feel more comfortable about what we're trying to do here, and maybe would like to participate in improving the educational program I'm trying to start here on Substack. Okay, but we don't seem to have that, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time on this video going through that. Please take a look at this Substack. The purpose of it is simple. I am going to try to present leadership communication topics every week, every week in the form of a newsletter. And that's not comprehensive, but it's packed with a lot of good information, that newsletter. And it's normally formulated in what is it the issue we're talking about, what is the impact of the issue, and what are two or three things you can do that can improve that. So that comes in the newsletter. And then what we try to do is we do a brief review of that newsletter just to refresh your memory. And I'll answer any questions you have here. And we could have a dialogue by chat, or we could have a dialogue where I could bring you on with me here. I think I actually have one of those situations where if you happen to be guest one, I can bring you in, and we could sit there and have a discussion about your situation. While other people on YouTube are watching us have that dialogue, they're going to learn a lot from that. So we have that potential way of doing business. So again, you go to the Substack, communicate, connect, and confidence. There's a reason for that main word. You communicate effectively or you communicate well, correctly, you effectively connect, and through that connection, you can establish the confidence or the trust between the two of you to operate cohesively and collaboratively together. So that's the whole rationale for that. Communicate, connect, and confidence. It's a process that happens. That's what happens when you communicate effectively. When you use emotional intelligence with communication process effectively, you interpersonally connect. You connect in a way that allows you to build trust and a good relationship. All right, I will cut this off now and hopefully spread the word and at least subscribe and look at a couple of the. You don't have to pay to look at a couple of the on an ongoing basis. You'll be able to look at the latest and the one before that. I think is the way it's set up. You can look at those newsletters. Now, what a paid person gets is they get all of those. They can go back and look at all of those. In addition to that, they have access to my these question and answers, all the videos of the question and answer session. So you literally have a digital library at your fingertips of how to become more effective as a new Renaissance leader, the new paradigm I'm talking about. You can actually grow into that role going through this process with us here if you get on board and if you engage and if we have dialogue. You cannot read the books. I mean, the books are great. I encourage you to go get them. Like I said, you can find them on my website, victorvogel.com. VictorLVogel.com. You have to put the L in there, victorlvogel.com. You can find the books there. And they're all ebooks. Are written for ebooks for a reason. I like ebooks better than I like paperback for a lot of reasons that I explain in a couple of videos you can look at on my Building Renaissance Leadership channel. There's actually a video that says, here's why I think ebooks are better than paperback and audiobooks for the purpose of instructions for textbooks. And that's what these are. And the other thing that people get when they get a paid subscription is they can book time with me. They can book an hour or so, and we can talk about different things that are on your mind, where you're talking to somebody with 45 years in the whole realm of human resource and culture design and leadership development. A guy that had 45 years of leadership, starting with being a young special forces officer for 5 years in the military back in the 60s, all the way up through the early 2000s, where I had my own consulting firm and was contracting out to multi-billion-dollar international corporations with multi-million-dollar change projects, cultural change projects. So I've got a lot to offer you if you want to come pay attention. All right. Have a good evening.